Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you've all had a great week. If you are new here, please consider subscribing if you end up liking this video. Before we get started with today's video, I wanted to let you guys know that I will be uploading every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. My family and I are going to California in late July, so I won't be able to upload for 2 Sundays in a row. So I just wanted to make sure that I gave you guys as much content as I possibly could before then. I know that a lot of you have been wanting to see more frequent uploads anyways. I do see your comments. So yeah, you will be seeing me every Sunday for the next 6 weeks. Okay, so today we are going to be talking about a now former Southern Baptist preacher from Waco, Texas, named Matt Baker. Matt Baker was a husband, father, and church leader who, as it turns out, was living a double life. He had a very long history of misconduct within the church, which unfortunately went totally unchecked. And this eventually gave Matt the idea that he was untouchable as long as he was seen as a man of the cloth within the community. And things really escalated when Matt was introduced to his music director's newly divorced daughter, Vanessa in 2005. After the two met, Vanessa and Matt pretty much immediately began having an affair. And then just a couple of months later, Matt's wife, Kari, suddenly died from an apparent overdose. Matt's perfect image as a loving, deeply religious husband and father kept suspicions mostly at bay at first, but in the end, his web of lies would finally be brought to light. I do want to give a warning that this video will have mentions of harming oneself, so just please keep that in mind before you watch this one. And now let's just go ahead and jump right in. But before we do, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, June's Journey. June's Journey is a murder mystery hidden object game set in the 1920s. You play as Detective June Parker, who travels from her home in London back to her childhood home in New York after hearing about the death of her sister. And once she arrives in New York, June quickly learns that things just aren't adding up and there's a cloud of suspicion surrounding the true circumstances of her sister's death. Lots of interesting characters are introduced along the way, leading June even deeper into the depths of her family's secrets. In each level, you are presented with a list of hidden objects to find within a scene, revealing hints and unlocking new pieces to the puzzle. And speaking of the scenes, they are all a work of art. The art style in this game is just so nice to look at. It definitely has a lot of charm. You can even decorate your island and mansion, which I love. I like any game that lets you customize or decorate in any way. I've actually been playing June's Journey for a long time now, well before I even had my channel, and I can confidently say that June's Journey has to be one of my all-time favorite mobile games. As I have mentioned before on this channel, I struggle with anxiety, and I will often play games or watch certain TV series when my anxiety is especially high as like a calming distraction. And June's Journey has become one of my go-tos in these kind of situations. June's Journey is available on Android and iOS mobile devices, as well as PC through Facebook Games. And you can download June's Journey for free by clicking the link below in the description. Thanks again to June's Journey for sponsoring this video, and now let's jump into the case. It's just after midnight in Waco, Texas on April 8th, 2006. A 911 call comes in from a 35-year-old local Baptist preacher named Matt Baker. Matt tells the dispatcher that he has just returned home to find his 31-year-old wife, Kari, naked and unresponsive in their bed. The dispatcher instructs Matt to move Kari to the floor and begin CPR while he waits for help to arrive.
Hey, with 911, do you have an emergency?
Yes, I think my wife just committed suicide.
Tell me exactly what happened.
My wife is laying in the bed, and her lips are blue, are cold, and there's a note that says "I'm sorry," basically.
Is she conscious?
No, she's not.
Breathing?
No, she's not breathing at all. No pulse or anything.
Oh, she's got foam or something coming out of her nose. Okay, someone's at the front door. I gotta go.
Once the EMTs and police arrive, they are greeted at the door by Matt. Matt leads them to the bedroom, and they immediately start working on Kari. They hook Kari up to an automatic defibrillator to see if there's any electrical activity detected, but there was nothing. So they start CPR while they wait for paramedics to arrive. And as they're working on Kari, Matt starts talking to the police. He says that he and Kari were planning to spend some time together that night, and she had asked him to go out to a local video rental store called Hollywood Video to rent a movie. More specifically, she wanted him to rent When a Man Loves a Woman, starring Meg Ryan, which was the movie that Kari and Matt had seen on their first date together years earlier. And Matt had left the house at around 11:15. While he was out getting the movie, he said that he also stopped to gas up his car, and then he returned home around midnight. When he arrived home, he went straight to his and Kari's bedroom and he found that the door was shut and locked. He knocked and he tried to call out to Kari, but there was no answer. And so he found a screwdriver and he used it to pry open the door, and he finally managed to get in. And when he did, he saw his wife lying on the bed, naked and unconscious. He says that he grabbed the cordless phone and dialed 911 immediately, and as he was talking to the dispatcher, he put a t-shirt and panties on Kari. Then, following the dispatcher's instructions, he says he moved Kari to the floor and started CPR. Matt also told police that he had found a typed out note from Kari on the nightstand next to an almost empty bottle of Unisom sleeping pills and some empty wine cooler bottles. The note read, "Matt, I am so sorry. I am so tired. I just want to sleep for a while. Please forgive me. Tell Kinsey and Grace that I love them very much. Tell my mom and dad that I love them too. I love you, Matt. I am so sorry for the past few weeks. I want to give Kassidy a hug. I need to feel her again. Please continue to be the great dad to our little girls. Love them every day for me. I am sorry. I love you, Kari." So they asked Matt if Kari had been struggling with her mental health leading up to this, and Matt said that she had. According to Matt, Kari had struggled a lot over the years following the death of their second daughter, Kassidy. Ever since that time, Kari understandably had struggled off and on with severe bouts of depression. Matt was very calm throughout this entire thing. He was casually walking around the house speaking to police. He wasn't visibly upset, but police also knew that everyone handles grief differently. Just because Matt wasn't hysterical didn't mean that he wasn't devastated over the situation. Paramedics arrived on the scene and got Kari loaded up into the ambulance, and then they took over efforts to save her life, but sadly, Kari never made it to the hospital. She was pronounced dead at 12:17 a.m. Waco did not have a medical examiner because the area was just too small, so when there was a death like this, authorities had to call the justice of the peace to determine the cause of death and to decide whether or not an autopsy would be performed. And without even leaving the comfort of his own home to go check out the scene or to just look at Kari's body, the justice of the peace determined over the phone that Kari had taken her own life and that no autopsy would be performed. But after all, this was the wife of a well-respected Baptist minister, so everything he said must be true. And with that, the case was closed before any investigation was done at all. But once word of Kari's untimely death reaches her therapist, she would come forward with some very interesting information that Kari herself had told her just days before she died. And before long, authorities and the entire nation would find out that Matt Baker was absolutely nothing like the person he pretended to be. He was not only a sexual predator and an adulterer hiding behind a carefully crafted, pious facade, but he was now also a murderer. Kari Lynn Doolin was born on August 13th, 1974 in Salt Lake City, Utah. She was the first child born to her mother Linda and father Scott, but Scott died when Kari was a baby, and after his death, Linda and Kari relocated to Waco, Texas to be closer to Linda's sister. I'm sure that most of you have heard of Waco, Texas because of its connections to David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. That whole debacle. Also, if you've ever heard of Chip and Joanna Gaines, then you've definitely heard of Waco. Waco is part of the Bible Belt. In fact, it's been referred to as the buckle of the Bible Belt. It's also home of Baylor University, which is a Christian university. And after settling into their new lives in Waco, Linda met and married a man named Jim Doolin when Kari was still very young. Jim and Kari instantly bonded and became very close, and eventually Jim adopted Kari after he and Linda got married. Linda and Jim had another child in 1980, a son they named Adam. Kari was described as a happy, funny kid. It said that people were just drawn to Kari. She was very outgoing. She had a lot of friends. She was on the basketball team and she was a cheerleader. And she was also very involved in her Baptist church. She attended church camps in the summer. She also volunteered at homeless shelters. And after graduating from Waco Christian High School, Kari briefly attended college at Texas Tech, but she decided that that school just wasn't good for her. She felt like she was maybe partying a little too much at Texas Tech, and because of that, she felt like that she hadn't been focused on her studies like she should have been. So before the start of her sophomore year, she decided to enroll at Baylor in Waco so she could be closer to family and sort of refocus on her goals. She wanted to become a teacher, and she also wanted to meet a good Christian man who she could marry and build a family with. In the summer of 1994, Kari started working as a lifeguard for the First Baptist Church summer camp. And unfortunately, it was here where she met someone who she thought was the answer to her prayers, her future husband, Matt Baker. Matt was a senior at Baylor, and he was working at the same summer camp as Kari at the First Baptist Church. Matt and Kari began dating pretty soon after they met. Kari was totally in love with Matt. She really believed that he was this nice Baptist man that she had been praying for. But unknown to Kari, Matt already had some very disturbing secrets from his past. Matt D. Baker was born on September 7th, 1971 in Kerrville, Texas, which is about 200 miles southwest of Waco. Matt was the youngest of two, and he had an older sister named Stacy. His parents, Barbara and Oscar, were also devoutly Baptist, and they raised their two kids to be the same, which Matt took to at a very young age. Matt's parents fostered several kids throughout his childhood, usually having at least 10 children living in the house at a time. Barbara would later estimate that they had fostered about 50 children over the years. Barbara described Matt as a great kid who never got into any trouble at all. She would actually say later that she doesn't remember a time she ever had to punish Matt. But as you will see, Barbara's judgment was obviously clouded when it came to her perfect son, Matt. Matt didn't really have too many friends in school, but he was well liked. He made good grades. He was in the band. He was also a trainer for the boys basketball team in high school. And after he graduated in 1990, he enrolled at Baylor with ambitions of becoming a youth minister, which makes a lot of sense after learning what Matt goes on to do. He majored in church recreation and athletic training, and he was a trainer for the Baylor Bears, which is the university's football team. And his reputation in college was pretty much the same as it was in high school. He didn't really have a lot of friends, but he was thought of as, a nice, responsible, pious guy. But during his freshman year, there were some rumors swirling around that Matt was trying to force girls to kiss him at parties. This was mostly just ignored, and his college friends would later say that they didn't even think twice about it because, quote, it was just a college thing. Even ministerial students, even those at Baylor, get horny, which is just gross. But during Matt's sophomore year, things escalated big time, which brings me to introduce you to a woman named Laura Wilson. In December of 1991, Laura Wilson was a freshman at Baylor who was also involved in the athletic training program. Now, this athletic training program at Baylor had a tradition of hazing the new incoming freshmen. And part of this hazing involved the freshmen sweeping the AstroTurf with a broom, clean the toilets and all the baseboards with a toothbrush. They would also be forced to work very late into the night. At first, Laura did whatever the upperclassmen, which included Matt Baker, by the way, told her to do. But one night, Matt told Laura that she had to clean the toilets and baseboards with a toothbrush, but with no gloves on. Not only was this disgusting, but it also caused Laura to suffer bleach burns on her hands. At that point, Laura had kind of had enough, so she walked over to Matt and she told him that he can finish cleaning the toilets himself. She handed him the toothbrush and then she left. And after that, things got much worse for Laura. The older students started being especially hard on her. They would heckle her and just be overall just really unpleasant towards her. They would also threaten to have Laura removed from the athletic program for any defiance. One night, Laura was vacuuming as part of her nightly cleaning duties, and two senior girls, along with like 10 other students behind them, started barking orders and throwing around more threats towards her. And at this point, Laura had just been pushed to her limit. So she stopped vacuuming and she told the girls that she wasn't listening to them anymore, and the only person she was going to take orders from now on was the head of the athletic program himself. Then she turned to walk away, and as she did, Laura heard one of the guys say, "You're gonna get it now." And one night, not long after that incident, Laura was on her way to clean the locker rooms when Matt Baker caught up with her and asked if she wanted some help. This was not Laura's typical type of interaction with Matt. He had never offered to help her before, but she thought that maybe he was just trying to be nice, so she accepted the help. And so Matt started following behind her towards the locker room. But then Matt started acting weird. He was holding a broom, and as they were walking, he started poking her in the butt with it. She told him to stop several times, but he didn't listen. When they finally arrived in the locker room, Laura went to clean the bathrooms while Matt was out in the main part of the locker room cleaning that area up. And while Laura was bending over cleaning one of the stalls, she got a feeling that someone was standing behind her. So she turns around really quick, and there's Matt just standing, watching. And then he lunged at her. He grabbed Laura's hands and forced them behind her back, and then he shoved her against a wall and started trying to kiss her. Laura is telling him to stop, and she's desperately trying to escape, and she's moving her head away so he couldn't kiss her. And then Matt asked, "What if I was Brian?" Brian was Laura's boyfriend, which is just so creepy. Laura is still frantically trying to get away, and she finally does manage to push Matt back, and then she tried to run. But Matt grabbed her in a bear hug type of hold, and he picked her up and put her on top of the counter near the sink. And then he forced her legs apart and tried to force himself on her. Laura did the only thing that she could think of in that moment, and she bit Matt on his shoulder as hard as she could, which did distract him long enough for her to escape the bathroom and run towards the main part of the locker room. But Matt still wasn't giving up, and he ran after her, and eventually he grabbed her before she could escape, and he pulled her on top of him and just began touching her in her private areas. Laura said at least a few minutes passed like this, with her trying to escape and Matt just holding on to her arms and not letting her go. And then he just said, "I'm done." And he let her go. He got up, and then he calmly just walked out of the locker room like nothing happened. Laura would later say that she never knew if what had happened that night had anything to do with her pissing off the upperclassmen that day. But as you'll see, this is a pattern with Matt that continues well beyond his college years. Maybe he did target Laura because of what happened with the hazing, but I personally think that this was just something Matt did on his own. After Matt walked out of the locker room, Laura was just left there crying and shaking, and she was just in absolute shock, and she didn't know what to do. She did make it to a phone, and she called her mother to tell her what happened. She also told a coach who noticed that she was crying when she had walked past him that night, and word of this attack did eventually make it to the head of the athletic training program, a man named Mike Sims. Laura's parents drove straight over to the university to be with their daughter and to talk to whoever they needed to talk to have Matt punished for what he did. They ended up having a meeting with Mike Sims, and they brought in Matt Baker and confronted him. And they even saw the bite mark on his shoulder, which backed up Laura's version of events. But Matt essentially acted like he didn't know that he did anything wrong, and he didn't know that he was hurting Laura. Mike Sims did promise Laura and her parents that Matt would be punished for what he did. And because of this promise, Laura didn't go to the police. She decided to let the university take care of it while she returned home for the holidays. But when Laura got back to Baylor after the break, she quickly realized that Matt had spread lies about what had actually happened. The other students were whispering about Laura and making fun of her for getting so upset over just being poked by a broom. That was apparently what Matt had told everyone while Laura was gone. And then she learned that Matt's punishment was that he had to stay in the locker room during the games to help the football players, which was actually a job that only the seniors were allowed to do. So according to Laura, this was no punishment. It was almost like he was being rewarded. This had a profound effect on Laura. She had constant nightmares, she struggled with PTSD, and she eventually dropped out of the athletic training program and left the university completely. Matt had ruined this girl's life, and he was able to remain in the same social and academic standing, while Laura's plans had to be put on hold while she tried to pull her life back together. Years after the assault, Laura did finally try to press charges, but unfortunately, it had been too long and the statute of limitations were up, so nothing could be done. And it wasn't long before Matt did something very similar to another woman on campus. I don't know the details about this assault, but I do know that the university ended up reaching out to Laura to have her give a written statement about what happened to her so they could add it to Matt's academic file. Matt was now no longer able to participate in any extracurriculars, and he was told that if he messed up just one more time, he he would be kicked out of the university. But it's disgusting that he was even given any chances after what he did to Laura, so a third chance is just pathetic. And when Matt's mother, Barbara, learned about the allegations about Laura and the other student, she flat out refused to believe it. The version of the story that Matt told to his mother, and the one that he would continue to tell for years after this, was that he saw Laura run out of the locker room crying because the lights had went out and she must have been afraid of the dark. Wow. Then only about a month after Matt assaulted Laura, he went home to Kerrville for a visit, and he started hanging out with an ex-girlfriend named Dina. Dina was a couple of years younger than Matt, so she was still in high school at this time, and when Matt came back into town, they kind of rekindled their relationship. One night after a party, Matt went back to Dina's parents' house with her, and Dina would later say that Matt was very aggressive with her, much more aggressive than he had ever been in the past. She said that it took all of her physical strength to keep her clothes on because he was just desperately trying to tear them off of her. Matt finally stopped, but only because he could hear Dina's mother outside of her bedroom door. And of course, when Barbara was told about this incident, she again refused to believe it was true. She said that Matt was, quote, maybe a little too aggressive, but what teenage boy isn't? And I'm not saying to don't ever believe your kids, but if your child is accused of something as serious as assault, especially on multiple occasions, it might be worth it to at least look into the situation. But that is not what happened in Matt Baker's case. He had been put up on a pedestal by his mother and his church for basically his entire life. So when he started being accused of some very serious offenses, he knew that all he had to do was deny and victim blame, and he would walk away scot-free. And that's exactly what happened for years. And things were going really well for Matt. He was actually selected for a highly sought after internship at First Baptist Church in Waco, working in the recreation department around lots of teenage girls. The man who selected him for this position would later say that he had no idea about Matt's past assaults, and that if he had known, he never would have given Matt that job. And now Matt is in a very opportunistic position, which he did take advantage of on countless occasions. And this was, of course, around the time that he met Kari at the First Baptist Church camp, where they were both now working. The two of them began dating, and the relationship moved very quickly, and Kari fell hard and fast for Matt. She had no idea that right after they started dating, Matt had cornered a 14-year-old camper, groped her, and then asked her to meet him behind some bins for sex. The girl got away, thankfully, and she did report the incident to one of the adults working at the camp. And again, Matt was brought in for questioning, and again, he denied any wrongdoing. And again, he got away with it. The person who confronted Matt said, quote, "It was a he said, she said situation. I told him he needed to be more careful, to not be alone with the teenage girls that work at the camp." And then Kari and Matt ended up getting engaged just a couple of months after they started dating. Kari's family did try to talk her out of it at first because they thought that the relationship was just moving way too fast, but Kari was so certain that Matt was the right one for her. She thought that he was gentle and sweet, and he was studying to become a Baptist minister. So her parents put their doubts aside, and just 3 months after they started dating, they got married in a little ceremony at Kari's family's home. But Matt had absolutely no plans to stop abusing women. In fact, right after they got married, like a couple of weeks after, another woman from the camp reported Matt for making sexual advances towards her. This woman worked at the camp as a custodian, and unlike Matt's previous victims, she was older. I'm not sure how old she was, but she was described as middle-aged. She said that Matt cornered her at the church when they were alone and asked her for sex. He said, quote, "I know what it's like to be with a young woman. I'd like to know what it's like to be with a mature woman." She, of course, refused, and then she reported Matt. And when he was confronted with these allegations, Matt again denied everything, and he just said that the woman was just flat out lying. At this point, the camp leaders were getting suspicious of Matt, but he said that he didn't want to ruin a young man's life with unfounded allegations, but that he did warn Matt that he needs to get some help. So obviously, this guy knew that Matt had a problem, and he just refused to do anything about it. Rumors started swirling all throughout the church camp, and eventually, Kari did hear about the two allegations from the 14-year-old and the custodian. But Kari just got angry that these people were accusing her husband of these terrible things. She fully believed Matt when he told her that it was all made up. Matt told Kari that they were just jealous that he was with her, and they had actually tried to hit on him, and when he refused to have sex with them, they retaliated by spreading vicious rumors about him. And Kari acted as if she totally believed in her husband's innocence, so she would defend him to anyone and everyone she could. good. This is a constant theme throughout their marriage. It's been said that Matt knew that Kari would defend him, so he would just sit back and let her fight his battles for him. And the allegations would just keep mounting over the years. In September of 1995, Matt left his job at First Baptist Church and he started a new job at the Family Y, which is a family recreation center. He was hired to run the children's after-school program. I mean, of course he was. And it wasn't long before several girls would come forward to report Matt for sexual harassment and in some cases assault. The first known incident occurred about 6 months after he started working at the Y. It had been a really slow work day that day and Matt was on shift with another employee who just happened to be a young college girl named Jackie. Matt told Jackie that he wanted her to go into another room with him so that he could teach her how to do the receipts. But Jackie declined because she already knew how to do the receipts. Matt insisted that Jackie had been making a lot of errors recently and that he really needed to show her the right way to do it. So she finally agrees to go with Matt so he can show her, what she's doing wrong, and he leads her into the youth recreation room, which was empty at this point. And as soon as he had Jackie alone in that room, he crept up behind her and grabbed her breast. Jackie quickly moved away, but Matt lunged at her. She began trying to fight him off and she's yelling at him to stop, but the more she fought, the more Matt persisted. This attack sounds a lot like the assault on Laura back in the Baylor locker room. He was just holding her down, trying to kiss her, touching her all over while she was trying to escape. And the attack only stopped because the phone rang in the rec room and Matt was worried that another worker was calling because they were looking for them. So he let Jackie go. Jackie was very upset and she was totally shaken up, but she didn't report the attack just yet. It wasn't until months later, when at least 3 other teenage workers reported Matt for similar incidents, that Jackie finally came forward with her own story. The other girls reported that Matt would ask them if they would ever have sex with a married man, and he would touch them inappropriately and just say really messed up sexual things to them. And due to all of these girls coming forward, Matt eventually was fired from his job at the Y. And I forgot to mention this, but Kari was actually pregnant with their first child when Matt attacked Jackie. And their first child, a daughter that they named Kinsey, was born on April 22nd, 1996. Matt just made up some BS reason about why he was fired from the Y, but word of these new allegations did eventually reach Kari. And when she asked Matt about it, he said that since he was gearing up to become a minister, he felt compelled to counsel his young, vulnerable teenage co-workers against having sex before marriage, and they must have just misunderstood his good intentions. And the sexual misconduct didn't just happen at work or school. The young girls in Kari's family also felt very uncomfortable around Matt because he had been inappropriate with them as well. On one occasion, Matt asked one of Kari's relatives if they wanted to go somewhere in private to have sex with him. On another occasion, at a big family gathering, Matt was very inappropriate with one of Kari's 14-year-old relatives. The girl was wearing a short skirt. When they were alone together, he asked her if she was wearing panties under her skirt. He would also do things like make groping gestures towards some of the women's breasts. Like, he wouldn't touch them, but he would act like he was going to. It seems like most of the family knew that Matt was a total creep, but to spare Kari's feelings, they never really said anything. They also had seen how passionately Kari defended Matt, so they were likely worried that if they said anything against him, that Kari would take Matt's side and it would cause a huge rift in the family. Matt would also never let Kari go anywhere alone aside from school and work, but if they were at a family gathering, he would stick to Kari the entire time. Or if Kari was doing something simple like going to get a haircut or going to the grocery store, he would insist on being right there with her. Kari's mother did ask her about this once, but Kari just said that Matt loves her and he just wants to be with her as much as possible. It's obvious that Kari was taking this sort of behavior as Matt just really loving her when it was really just control. There was also an incident with a laptop that had belonged to Kari and Matt. One day, Kari noticed that the laptop was running super slow, so she started digging around to try to figure out what was going on, and she ended up finding pornography on it. Matt, of course, said that he had nothing to do with it, and so Kari just decided to just get rid of the laptop altogether, and she ended up giving it to her younger brother Adam, who was attending college at the time. But it was running so insanely slow that Adam couldn't even use it for anything, so he ended up giving it to his and Kari's dad, Jim. Jim knew someone at work who was really good with computers, so he brought the laptop up to work and he gave it to his friend to look at to see if he could figure out why it was running so slow. But after this guy looked at the laptop, he realized that it was completely full of porn. So Linda and Jim mentioned this to Kari and Matt blamed it on Adam. And because their son-in-law was a preacher, they really didn't look at him as being the reason for this. In the fall of 1996, Matt was accepted into Baylor's Theological Seminary to finish his schooling and finally become a minister. And apparently no one looked into this guy's background because it wouldn't have taken much digging around to find several allegations against him. But unfortunately, this didn't happen, and now Matt was in the final stages of becoming a minister. Kari ended up pregnant again in 1997, and she had their second daughter that November, and they named her Kassidy. And right before Kassidy's birth, Matt assaulted another teenager. This time it was one of their neighbor's daughters, and Matt did this in the parking lot of their townhome building. He approached the girl and asked if she had ever kissed anyone, and then he kissed her. The girl immediately went home and told her mother about this, and Kari eventually found out. And again, she believed Matt when he denied it, and she defended him. She even went over to the neighbor's home and confronted them about it and insisted that the girl was lying because her husband would never do anything like that. About a year after Kassidy was born, tragedy struck the family when she was diagnosed with a brain tumor. An MRI showed that there was a large tumor at the base of her brain, and she needed immediate surgery to remove it. The surgery was going to be very risky, but Kassidy actually did make it through. However, she did have some complications. Just hours after her surgery, her lungs began to fill with fluid and a trach had to be put in to allow her to breathe. Kassidy was in the hospital for several months while she received chemo treatments and got some of her strength back. But throughout all of this, Matt seemed totally unfazed, and others would say that it almost seemed like he actually enjoyed the attention from family and friends. And Matt couldn't even put his creepy behavior on hold while his daughter was in the hospital fighting for her life. In fact, he propositioned a 20-year-old friend of the family for sex right there in the hospital waiting room while Kari was at Kassidy's bedside. Once doctors felt confident that Kassidy was going to pull through, they decided to allow her to return home. She did have a feeding tube in, and she still had her trach in place, so the doctors taught Matt and Kari how to clean everything. They also gave them a monitor that would alert them if Kassidy stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Matt and Kari also hired a home health nurse who would come to their house and help take care of Kassidy for about 8 hours during the day. And Kassidy seemed to be doing great. She was walking, she was smiling, she was moving around so much. She just seemed to be doing so much better. The family and the community breathed a huge sigh of relief because they really felt like their prayers had been answered and the worst was behind them. And then one night around midnight, Matt got up to check on the girls. When he came back to bed, he told Kari that everything was fine. But then about 10 minutes later, for reasons we still don't really understand, he got up again and went back into Kassidy's room and found her not breathing. Matt yelled out for Kari to call 911, which she did, and Kari was absolutely hysterical. The monitor that was supposed to alert them if Kassidy stopped breathing was not on that night. Matt would claim that they didn't put the monitor on her at night anymore, but Kari would tell her family that Matt had insisted that Kassidy not wear the monitor the night she died. Kari would also later say that Matt would not let her go into the room to help or see her daughter when he found her unresponsive. Kassidy was rushed to the hospital, but despite doctors and nurses' best efforts, she passed away. Everyone was devastated. Even the doctors and nurses were crying. Kari was screaming and just sobbing, but Matt was standing in the background just totally emotionless. He didn't cry or console his wife. He just stood there and watched. Kari and Matt were allowed to take Kassidy into an empty hospital room. That way family members could take turns coming in to say their goodbyes. And Kari just sat in that room and cradled her daughter and just sobbed, while Matt just casually stood off on the sidelines. Then, according to one of Kari's relatives who had went into the room to say goodbye to Kassidy, Matt started trying to pull Kassidy's trach out, almost as if he suddenly remembered something and he needed that tube out right then. But Kari wasn't having it. She refused to let him touch Kassidy. The relative who witnessed this thought that it was really weird, but she didn't know what to make of it at the time. But Matt raised even more eyebrows at Kassidy's funeral when he again showed no emotion and didn't even try to console his grieving wife. According to several family members, Matt was just walking around acting like it was just any other day. A week after Kassidy's death, Kari called the oncologist who had been Kassidy's doctor throughout her entire battle with cancer just to let her know that Kassidy had passed away. And the oncologist immediately felt like something was wrong. She told Kari that Kassidy was not supposed to die and she had left the hospital with a great prognosis. And the doctor actually ended up calling CPS to investigate the Bakers, which absolutely broke Kari. She thought this conversation would be more like the two of them, consoling each other over Kassidy's passing, but that's not what happened at all. CPS did come out and talk to Kari and Matt, but nothing ever came of that. And Matt just went right back to life as normal. According to a family friend, she heard him say, quote, "Now I can get back to work." She said it was almost as if he was relieved that Kassidy was gone so he could just get back to his life. Matt also started immediately pressuring Kari for sex, which she told family members she had no interest in at the moment. Understandably, she had literally just lost her child. Kari started seeing a grief counselor named Ann Bristol, who was also a family friend. This would be the same counselor that Kari would confide in years later, just days before she was murdered. Kari and Matt did eventually have one more child together. It was another daughter who they named Grace. And the birth of this child definitely seemed to help Kari with her grief. She still struggled on every anniversary of Kassidy's death, but as the years went on, she definitely got better at managing her emotions. So over the years, Matt had been hired and fired from several churches since becoming a minister, mostly for inappropriate behavior. But in the fall of 2005, Matt landed what seemed like a dream position as preacher of Crossroads Baptist Church in Waco, the same church that Kari's parents attended. Kari had gotten her degree in education at this point, so she took a teaching position at the school that Kenzie and Grace attended, and life seemed pretty great from the outside. And then a woman named Vanessa Bowles enters the picture. Vanessa Bowles was the daughter of the music minister at Crossroads Baptist Church. She was 23 years old and newly divorced and had a young daughter named Lily. And Vanessa had moved in with her parents in Waco so that they could help her take care of her daughter while she tried to get her life back on track. So towards the end of 2005, Vanessa started regularly attending church with her parents, and that's when she caught the eye of Minister Matt Baker. And Matt was immediately attracted to Vanessa. She was described as an attractive, slender blonde, and she was much younger than Kari. And Matt immediately set his sights on getting with her. And so at a Christmas potluck that year at the church, Matt decided to shoot his shot with Vanessa. He pulled her into a deserted hallway and asked her if she would ever consider having an affair with her pastor.
I was outside getting some food and he started walking down the hallway and he kind of motioned for me to walk down that way. He said, "Will you really date your pastor?" And I didn't say anything. I just kind of looked at him. He said, I've had a vasectomy, so I can't get you pregnant. Also, I don't have any STDs.
And with that amazing pickup line, the two began a passionate affair. Matt had Fridays off, but Kari and the kids were gone all day at work and school, so Matt would invite Vanessa over for counseling sessions, during which they would have sex in Matt and Kari's own bed. And Kari pretty much immediately felt like something was off in her marriage. She didn't think affair like right off the bat, but her gut told her that something wasn't right. Matt was distant and he wasn't trying to have sex with her anymore, which wasn't like him at all. He was usually the type that wanted to have sex all the time. So Matt and Kari had this little routine where they would send emails back and forth to each other all throughout their workday. And there are several emails that give us some insight into how Kari was feeling around this time. One of Kari's emails read, "There's something on my mind. Matt, I love you very much, and I wasn't joking about what I said last night. I do not doubt your love for me. I just think that something has changed in you. I can't figure out what it is, and until you open up and tell me what's going on, we cannot go any further. Never in our marriage have you ever told me no. And I guess I feel like this is just one way you're pulling away." Matt responded to all of Kari's emails like this, essentially blaming her for the way she was feeling. And in one email, he even blamed Kari for Kassidy's death. The email is crazy long, so I'm just going to give you the gist of it. He basically said that night before Kassidy died, he had prayed that she would be cancer-free and she would live a long, healthy life. But Kari had prayed that Kassidy would no longer be in pain. And God had answered Kari's prayer instead of his. And because of this, he blamed Kari for Kassidy's death. This email absolutely crushed Kari, and it actually made her, for the first time, contemplate divorce. But based on some of the emails that they sent to each other over the next few days, it seems like things were smoothed over. And Matt had even finally caved and had sex with Kari, which was something he hadn't done in a while. This was all discussed in another email exchange. Kari wrote, "Haven't heard from you, so I thought I would say hi. Maybe you're busy with your girlfriend." Matt responds, "Yeah, babe, I was hooking up with my girlfriend. By the way, what is her name anyway? Love you very much." Then Kari says, "Well, I thought that maybe you have been learning all those crazy moves you did last night someplace." Matt says, "You know it. Tomorrow I'm going to buy an item or two for Friday. I'm going to shock you." And while Matt is sending emails like this back and forth with his wife, he's secretly, constantly calling Vanessa Bowles and meeting up with her for sex.
He started saying, "It's okay. Don't feel bad. Just ask God to forgive you. It's okay." And he said, in reality, he said, "I don't think God believes that anyone can just be with one person the rest of their lives."
According to Vanessa, Matt spoke openly to her about wanting to kill Kari. He called her a fat bitch and said that he wanted her out of the way so that he could be with Vanessa. So just a couple of months into his and Vanessa's affair, Matt started brainstorming ideas on how he could get rid of Kari. He thought about a drive-by shooting, hanging, cutting her brakes on her car, but he finally settled on a staged, deliberate overdose. Matt knew that Kari took Unisom sleeping pills nightly ever since Kassidy died, because since then, she had a really hard time falling asleep. And he knew that he could easily make it look like Kari was depressed over Kassidy and had taken her own life by overdosing on sleeping pills. But his first attempt didn't work. According to Vanessa, one night in March, Matt had made Kari a chocolate shake, which is something that she loved, and he put a large dose of crushed sleeping pills into the shake. But it didn't work because as soon as Kari took a sip, she said it tasted like lead and she wouldn't drink it. Matt took a sip and he was like, "Oh, the ice cream must be bad," and he just dumped the shake down the drain. This can kind of be backed up by an email that Matt had sent to Kari the day after that attempt that read, "Do you want anything special tonight? How about a chocolate shake with more chocolate syrup? Just joking. Love you." Kari had this Bible that she had written in for years. She would make little journal entries in this Bible all the time. And based on some of the entries that she made leading up to her death, she started getting suspicious that she might be in danger. One entry in March read, "Lord, I am asking you to protect me from harm. I'm not sure what's going on with Matt, but Lord, help me find peace with him." And just 2 days after that entry, Kari found some very disturbing evidence that backed up her fears. While looking around their bedroom for a pin, Kari opened up Matt's briefcase and found a toothpick container that had been emptied out and filled up with crushed pills. Kari grabbed this container and confronted Matt immediately, but he told her that it must have been put there by some of the kids from the youth center. According to Matt, sometimes the kids didn't want to take their medicine and they would hide it, and they must have just hid it in his briefcase, which makes absolutely no sense at all. Why would they hide their pills in Matt's briefcase knowing that he would find it and ask about it? But more importantly, why would the kids first crush up their medicine and then hide it? Makes absolutely no sense. Kari obviously didn't fully believe this story because just a few days later at her appointment with her counselor, Kari told Anne that she not only suspected Matt was having an affair, but she thought that he might be trying to kill her. Anne didn't say anything to anyone at the time because by the end of the session, Kari had completely taken back her accusations, and she assured Anne that she knew she was being ridiculous and that Matt would never hurt her. But then just a few days later, Kari would be dead. Matt has never admitted to killing Kari, so we don't have an honest account of what happened that night from someone who was actually there. But according to Vanessa Bowles, Matt had bought some sex stimulant capsules. This may have been something that Matt and Kari had actually used in the recent past, since he had mentioned buying something fun for them to use in the bedroom in that email that we talked about earlier. So Matt opened up the capsules. They were like the little twist off shells, and he emptied them out and then filled them back up with Ambien. Ambien is a prescription strength sleeping aid that is usually used to treat insomnia. Then on the night of April 7th, Matt and Kari were having what Kari thought was an intimate evening together, and they were about to have sex. So Matt gets those prepared pills out, which Kari thinks are sex stimulant pills, and she takes them. Matt then handcuffed Kari to the bed under the guise that they were getting ready to have this wild sexual encounter. He then started kissing and touching Kari all over until she finally fell into a deep sleep. Then, according to Vanessa, Matt told her he kissed Kari on the forehead and said either "Give Kassidy a hug from me," or "Give Kassidy a kiss from me." Then he grabbed a pillow, put it over her face, and smothered her to death.
He said he handcuffed her to the bed, started kissing her and touching her all over until she fell asleep. And then he showed me his hand. He said he put the pillow on her face, but then he said he did this with his hand where her nose was, where her nose and mouth were. He said he did this area tighter so he would be sure to suffocate her.
And Kari, being handcuffed and heavily drugged, wouldn't have been able to fight back. He then hopped onto the family's computer, typed up the note, and then he rubbed Kari's hands all over the paper before staging it on the nightstand next to the Unison bottle and the empty wine coolers. Then he left the house. He went to the movie rental place to pick up that movie. He gassed up his car. That way, the story that he would later tell police would actually check out if they looked into it. He then returned home to discover his dead wife in the room. Now, if this is how it happened, which evidence says that this is what happened, then that means that Matt killed Kari, then left his 2 little girls in the house alone with their mother's dead body while he went out to establish an alibi. As word of Kari's death started to spread throughout the family, lots of relatives showed up to the Baker home to offer their condolences and to check on Matt and the girls. And just hours after Kari died, Matt made suggestive gestures towards her cousin, acting as if he was going to grab her breasts. Who the fuck does that? And if that wasn't bad enough, Vanessa Bowles herself, along with her parents, went over to the Baker home that same afternoon that Kari had died to pay her condolences. No one suspecting that Matt and Vanessa were having an affair or that they had anything to do with Kari's death. And as Vanessa and her family went to leave, Matt actually winked at her. And much like he had at Kassidy's funeral, Matt didn't show any emotion at Kari's either. And by April 21st, just 2 weeks after Kari died, Matt was already parading Vanessa around. He had a slumber party for Kenzie's birthday, and Vanessa came along to help out along with 2 other friends of the family. But things just felt really off when the friends started to notice that Matt had removed pretty much every picture of Kari or family pictures with Kari in them. All traces of her were gone. The only photo up was on the refrigerator, and it was of Vanessa Bowles. And that night at the party, Vanessa and Matt were acting really inappropriately. First of all, they disappeared for a while into a room by themselves, and then later they were seen on the couch with Vanessa's head laying in Matt's lap. Then just a few days after that, Vanessa and Matt went shopping for engagement rings. This is less than a month after Kari's death. They weren't even trying to hide it. Kari's mother, Linda, tried to put any suspicions out of her mind even after Kari's counselor told them about Kari's suspicions. But when Linda received her monthly phone bill, she couldn't ignore it anymore. Linda had put Kari and Matt on her cell phone plan so that they could save some money, so the bill would come to her house every month. And as Linda was scanning through her statement, she saw that someone had been using Kari's cell phone after her death, and whoever was using it had made and received several calls from Matt, and she quickly figured out that this person was Vanessa Bowles. Matt had given Vanessa Kari's old cell phone, and the 2 of them had been chatting quite a bit recently. She also saw a weird number that appeared several times in the days leading up to Kari's death, which she would later find out belonged to Vanessa's parents' home phone. This pretty much sealed it for Linda. She knew that Matt was responsible for Kari's death, and after this, she and her sisters and one of her nieces got together to take Matt down. Kari's body was eventually exhumed for an autopsy, and Ambien was found in her system. Kari did not have a prescription for Ambien, and when word got out that Kari's body was being exhumed for an autopsy and an investigation was likely going to be open, Vanessa panicked and she ended things with Matt.
He sent me song lyrics, "I'll keep you my dirty little secret. Don't tell anyone or you'll be just another regret." He became irate. He started saying, "I killed my wife for you, and now you're leaving."
He was also eventually pushed out of Crossroads Baptist Church, and he and the girls ended up moving to Kerrville with his parents. Linda and her sisters and niece became known around town as Charlie's Angels due to all the detective work that they were doing in Kari's case. They would meet up and they would work through mounds of evidence and information. The local police were no help, by the way. When Linda had initially tried to have Kari's body exhumed, they flat out refused, and they were very rude to her and extremely dismissive. So to get any of this done, they had to go through some pretty complicated channels involving private investigators and the Texas Rangers. There was lots of circumstantial evidence in this case. Matt had plenty of motive, Vanessa Bowles being the main one, but also Matt received a $51,000 check from Kari's retirement plan after she died. One thing that really struck everyone as odd from the very beginning was that note Kari supposedly left was typed, not handwritten, and it wasn't even signed. And the 911 call would play a major role in taking Matt Baker down. His actions, or lack of, during the 911 call were very suspicious. If you remember from the beginning of the video, when the EMTs arrived on the scene, they were greeted by Matt at the door. Matt was actually standing outside when they pulled up. And it's very important to note here that the ambulance did not have a siren on, and the dispatcher did not tell Matt that anyone had arrived at the front door. Yet somehow Matt knew that they had pulled up. At the same time, he was telling the dispatcher that he was actively performing CPR on Kari in the bedroom.
Oh, she's got foam or something coming out of her nose. Okay, someone's at the front door. I gotta go.
When the dispatcher asked Matt if he was still performing CPR, he said yes. So if that's true, then how did Matt know that the ambulance had arrived at the house? How did Matt know that anyone had arrived with absolutely zero warning if he had still been doing CPR in the room like he told the dispatcher? Well, the answer to that question is that he wasn't doing CPR on his wife in the bedroom. In fact, he wasn't in the bedroom at all. So why would a husband lie about giving his dying wife CPR unless he wanted her to die? Matt also claimed that he had found Kari naked initially, but while he was on the phone with 911, he dressed her in a t-shirt and panties. But you never hear Matt struggle to do this or even set the phone down. Matt himself would later say he never set the phone down. He said that he had the phone positioned like this on his ear. This wouldn't have been an easy task. Kari weighed close to 200 pounds and she was totally limp, so that was pure dead weight. Matt would have been out of breath and fumbling around with the phone if he had dressed her while he was on the phone with 911 like he said. And as you can tell from the 911 call, Matt sounds totally calm and almost emotionless.
My wife is laying in the bed, and her lips are blue, are cold, and there's a note that says "I'm sorry," basically.
Is she conscious?
No, she's not.
Breathing?
No, she's not breathing at all. No pulse or anything.
And I know that there's no textbook way to react to these situations, but when a person discovers their spouse dead or dying, surely there would be some emotion or some inflection or some change in tone. Matt sounds totally casual throughout the entire call. Also, as soon as the paramedics had started working on Kari, they immediately knew that Kari was already dead. And in fact, it looked as if Kari had actually been dead for quite some time. Not only was her body cool to the touch, but they could also see clear signs of something called lividity. Lividity happens when the blood from a deceased person begins to pool due to gravity, causing darkening of specific areas of the skin. When the heart stops beating, blood is no longer being circulated throughout the body. So the blood just sits there and it begins to settle in various areas depending on the position of the body. Kari had darkening in her back, her hands, arms, and the back of her neck. And the extent of the lividity found on Kari's body was more consistent with someone who had been dead for about 2 hours, which did not line up with Matt's timeline that he had only been gone for 45 minutes and that Kari had been alive when he left. They also combed through Matt's online search history and found so much porn, and he was actually watching it while he was at work at the church. They also found out that Matt had been searching websites that sold Ambien online. Again, Kari did not have a prescription for Ambien, but it was found in her system. So where did it come from? All of Matt's history of sexual assault was finally brought to light as well, dating all the way back to that first known case of Laura Wilson back in the Baylor locker room. The circumstantial evidence was just piling up, and the idea that Matt could have been responsible for Kassidy's death as well started to be thrown around. Kari's father told Crossroads Baptist Church deacons all of their suspicions, and they ended up asking Matt to resign, which he did. He then took the girls and moved to his parents' home in Kerrville. And on March 25th, 2009, after months of gathering evidence and going back and forth with the courts, the case was finally going before a grand jury. And the prosecution didn't even realize that they had their smoking gun sitting on the witness stand that day, Vanessa Bowles. She had been questioned leading up to this point, but she never gave up too much information. She was finally subpoenaed, and unknown to anyone in the court, Vanessa had decided to come clean right there on the stand. Vanessa told the jury that Matt had killed Kari in order to be with her. Everyone in the courtroom was in total shock. No one expected this to happen that day. And with that testimony, the decision was made to indict Matt, and he was finally arrested. He did end up posting bond at $250,000, and he awaited trial at his parents' house in Kerrville. But things only got worse for Matt once his trial started. The prosecution called 27 witnesses who all, one by one, got up on the stand and proved that Matt's version of events could not be true. One of the people they called was a woman who worked at the jewelry store that Matt and Vanessa had visited that day looking for engagement rings. Matt told everyone that they were actually there that day to look for earrings for one of his daughters, that they had never looked for engagement rings, and if Vanessa had been looking for engagement rings, he didn't even know about it.
She tried on about 4 or 5 rings, asked his opinion.
He was asking someone behind the jewelry counter about a trade-in and how much he could possibly get a discount on another ring.
Vanessa was, of course, also called to testify, and she told them all of the details of the murder as Matt had told them to her. She told them all about the plans to kill Kari, the failed attempts backed up by that email, the manner that Kari died, which lined up perfectly with the evidence. The prosecution got in touch with Laura Wilson, the freshman that Matt had assaulted at Baylor. She was called to the stand, and she was finally able to tell her story for everyone to hear. I know that she was cheated out of getting him convicted for what he did, but hopefully being able to finally tell the world what an absolute monster Matt Baker is was at least some sort of justice for her. And Matt did not take the stand, by the way. His defense said that they found out that the prosecution had set a trap for Matt. If he got on the stand, then they were planning to make him demonstrate how in the hell he managed to dress a nearly 200-pound woman who was dead weight without dropping or fumbling with a cordless phone or becoming severely out of breath. The prosecution knew that Matt couldn't do it and it would be case closed for them when he failed, so they advised him not to take the stand. But even without that trap, Matt was finally found guilty and sentenced to 65 years in prison. As far as I know, Vanessa Bowles was never tried for any involvement she had in Kari's murder. I believe she worked out a deal with the prosecution, and it is believed that Matt could have also killed Kassidy, but as far as I know, that has not been proven or thoroughly investigated. Vanessa told investigators that Matt had mentioned that he had removed Kassidy's trach tube, then replaced it the night that she died, which is something that he had never told anyone before. If that's true, it would explain why Matt had tried to pull out the tube after Kassidy died. Maybe he didn't want anyone to notice that it had been tampered with. The prosecution did try to get a hold of Kassidy's death records to look into everything, but the request was blocked since the judge didn't see it as relevant to Kari's case. And the most recent information I could find on the two girls, Grace and Kinsey, was from all the way back in 2010. They were living with Matt's parents, but they would frequently travel to Waco to visit Kari's parents, and there was a custody hearing pending at that time as well. And that was the truly despicable case of Matt Baker, later dubbed the murdering minister. I know this was a long one. Thank you so much if you managed to stick around to the end. Please let me know what you guys think about this one down in the comments. Do you think that Matt killed Kassidy? I personally 100% believe that he did, especially after reading a book about this case that goes into a lot more detail on the trial and all of the evidence. It's called Deadly Little Secrets, and they actually have an Audible version of it. It's a great book if you're interested in this case. Thanks again to June's Journey for sponsoring this video, and don't forget to scan that QR code or click the link in the description to check out June's Journey. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing and following me on Instagram at summer_SanchezYT. And as always, I appreciate each and every one of you for watching, and I will see you next time.